Councillors, I'd like to welcome members of the public and press to today's meeting. And in particular, I'd like to give a very warm welcome to Gordon Patterson, who's the new Chief Officer and Director of Health Social Care. Where is Gordon?
Just to your right.
Nice to meet you, Gordon. And also welcome to Charlene Guild, who has joined PKC to help us with the Perth Kinross offer. Charlene? She's there somewhere. Anyway, welcome to them both. Can I remind, as usual, councillors and officers to use microphones and request that those attending the meeting ensure that all mobile phones and other communication devices are in silent mode. I can also remind you that the meeting will be recorded and be available on YouTube via the Council's website following the meeting. And I can advise that there will be approximately an hour-long break for lunch at probably about 1 o'clock or wherever. We'll see how things develop. Are there any apologies for today's meeting?
We have no apologies today, Provost.
No apologies. Thank you. Item 2 is declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest for today's meeting? No? Lovely. Right, I would now like to ask the Head of Legal Service and Governance Services to remind councillors of the guidance surrounding the pre-election period.
Good morning, councillors. As you'll be aware, we are in the pre-election period, which is deemed to be a period of high sensitivity in terms of publicity, and so therefore you will be aware of the guidance which the Electoral Commission has issued, which has all been issued to everyone. I would remind people that whilst we are at liberty to get on with business as usual within the chambers, we must refrain from comments and statements which are deemed or perceived to be politically divisive, and I would just ask people to be circumspect in some of their discussions and debates in the course of today. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Provost, thank you. I'm grateful for that. We are in Perth. We may have European elections on the 23rd of May. Then again, we may not. We just don't know, given the shambles we have. What I do want to do is we've got to adhere to those rules. I'd like to ask, and I'm not trying to promote this motion, it could come back to Council on the 17th of the full Council, but that is the motion on the reduction in tourism VAT. Is it competent for us in a period of Perth to debate that motion, when in particular the motion does relate to a whole lot of European matters and VAT-related matters? Thank you.
We've considered that motion in light of the fact that we are in the period of pre-election, Purda, as you say, and the essence of the motion, in fact, is simply to ask the Leader of the Council to write a letter. So on that basis, we are happy that it's not particularly politically divisive, since there is cross-party support for supporting the tourist industry in terms of the motion. So the terms of the motion itself don't seem to be anything that's particularly contrary or controversial.
Okay, thank you. Any other?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure we are doing the right thing, and I think that's important.
Okay. Right, the Deputy Provost and I will continue to share the Council agenda as we've done previously, and he will now take item 3 on today's agenda, which outlines 3 motions for you to consider this morning.
Morning everyone. Thank you, Provost. Item 3.1, I'd remind councillors that it was agreed at the meeting of the Strategic Policy and Resources Committee on the 17th of April that the Leader of the Council would bring forward a motion to Council as soon as possible. In the light of this decision, the Provost has already agreed to accept this as an urgent motion for consideration at today's meeting. However, in terms of Standing Order 4, before we proceed to discuss the motion at all, we're required to make a decision on the suspension of standing orders. That is normally done with a roll call vote to take place with a 2/3 majority required. I don't know if the Head of Legal Services and Governance want to add anything to that.
No, Deputy Provost. Simply, we are required to suspend standing orders before the reconsideration of this motion, albeit that it has been accepted on the agenda. So we would need a motion to suspend standing orders.
We require to have a motion to suspend standing orders. Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I move that we have a motion to suspend standing orders for this urgent item of business.
Thank you.
To second that motion, Deputy Provost.
Thank you indeed. Now, it is normal practice where there's a procedural motion to go straight to the vote, which is a roll call vote, where the vote would be either for or against the suspension of standing orders. Councillor McDade, I see your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Provost. My question is a point of order. It is under Standing Order 41. I just want clarification from the convener of the council in terms of under Section 50B of the Local Government Scotland Act, which term he considers as a matter of urgency, just for clarification for the minutes, since that is required.
We'll seek advice from the Head of Legal Service and Governance, first of all, on that matter. Just give us a moment to digest your question.
Be with you in a minute, Councillor. It's better to get it right.
I don't have Section 50B to hand. Councillor McDade, do you have Section 50B to hand?
Deputy Provost.
Councillor.
Councillor Dugan, could you just give us a moment, please?
I will indeed.
I'll come to you again.
Provost will outline the reasons for it.
Sorry, Provost, it does specify the convener has to specify it.
Sorry?
It does specify that the convener has to specify, which is yourself.
He was just going to read it out. But there are special circumstances here outlined at SPNR, and I'm content with it. So if that's what you want me to do, and the Deputy Provost is getting more information, so you can keep you happy.
Thank you for the question. The special circumstances that make this urgent are that there needs to be a decision made on this before the next full council meeting in order to meet deadlines that would otherwise accounts would go out in terms of IMS fees. And that's the reason why we're doing it at this stage. Okay. Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In the first instance, I wanted to simply seek your assurance that we'll have an opportunity to ask questions about the process and the reasons behind the motion to suspend standing orders.
As part of the IMS debate itself?
No, as part of, so that Council can fully understand the nature and priority with which we're being asked to suspend standing orders, if we can ask questions on that.
think if there are any procedural questions, then of course we can take them. We've covered the point that Councillor McDade has raised. Are there any other questions on the procedural matter of the suspension of standing orders? Councillor Grantley.
I ask for your forbearance. I ask that we have a discussion as to so that we can understand why this is an emergency, and we would probably be minded to support it, but if we've been denied the chance to talk how we've reached to this situation, I can't, in all honesty, support the suspension of standing orders if I'm not going to be allowed to have a discussion with it beforehand.
I think, Councillor, we're going to have a recess for 5 minutes. Okay? Recess for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Provost. I understand that a number of members have asked for further clarification of the reasons for the request for the suspension of standing orders, and that was the gist of the questions. And in light of that, I'm going to ask the Leader of the Council to explain a bit more about the detail of why the suspension has been requested.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I just really want to clarify that, one, this is a roll call vote on a procedural process rather than anything else. And just to reiterate the comments I made last week at SPNR, the reason that the budget decision was taken on the day as was a misunderstanding on my part of the charges regarding instrumental music services. I articulated this last week at SPNR, and I agreed to bring this back to full council today. The urgency, as far as I'm concerned, is that invoices will have to be produced and sent out prior to the next full council meeting making a decision. So therefore, on that basis, I feel the decision on this has to be made one way or the other today. I hope that clarifies to members here, and it really reiterates my position that there are two decisions to be made here. One, do we suspend standing orders? And two, do we agree the motion that will come subsequently? They are two different items and should be treated accordingly.
I hope that adds some information to the Council. We're in a procedural motion situation.
It's about the procedure of it being urgent.
Okay.
Sorry for not standing up.
That's okay. Carry on. If it's a procedural issue.
Well, it's questioning the urgency of this. The decision to raise these charges was taken in February 2018 by the administration. They had a year to change that, or at least 6 months after that. They then had to change their budget setting process to change it, their decision to reverse it. They didn't do it then. They then had the chance on the day when they found out that there was this, we'll say it, misunderstanding. They had the chance to take money from reserves then when they were doing their budget proposals, which they voted through. So it's been voted through twice by the administration. How can it suddenly be urgent if it's been in train for now 14 months, this decision?
Councillor Ling, I think Councillor Lyle has already explained the reason for that. Because of the financial year we're now in and the likelihood of invoices being sent out, we've raised the matter today, and that was already explained at the Policy and Resources Committee, I understand. I wasn't present at it, but I understand that was the case.
But unfortunately, Vice President, this decision was taken 14 months ago, and everybody's been aware of it for 14 months. How does it become urgent now?
I can't add anything to what Councillor Lyle's already said, but I'll allow him the opportunity to respond to your question.
As I did indicate to Councillor Lane earlier, the misunderstanding was on my part, and that when in reading the budget papers, I understood that there wouldn't to be a further 20% increase in instrumental music fees this year, and we agreed not to increase things as part of our budget motion. My understanding at that time was that they would be flatlined. Consequently, I found out during the budget process, and I've no arguing or debate on that, that we were bound by the decision of the previous year's budget. So therefore, because that was not the intention of the administration, I have taken what I see as the first opportunity to remedy that, and that's why I've brought this back to this council today.
So, sorry, if it was available on the 20th of February, this isn't the first opportunity to remedy it. The first opportunity would have been the first council meeting after that. This has come around and become extremely urgent because we've had no action since the budget meeting on this. Not the first opportunity.
Okay. Councillor Ling, I think the Provost wants to make a ruling on where we are now.
Right, the legal, councillors, the legal basis is that families will now be issued with invoices for increased fees. That's the situation at the moment. So, unfortunately, it would mean that I would have to accept this as an urgent matter, and therefore I would move to the vote. I think we have to. I've just taken legal advice on this as well, and on the basis that the families will now be issued with invoices for the increased fees, this is urgent. So I think we have to move to the vote. Okay?
Sorry, Provost, but can I just ask a procedural question on the voting?
Sorry, we also have to suspend standing orders to allow this.
Can I? Is it okay for to ask a question on the voting, Provost? I just want to understand, just in these very unexpected circumstances, to require the suspended, to suspend statutory orders. Regarding the roll call, if anybody's minded to abstain on the roll call, does that actually count within the roll call to get the 2/3 majority required?
Provost, I can just clarify, when I take the roll call vote, members will be asked to vote for or against the suspension of standing orders. If a member was to abstain on the vote, that's fine in terms of normal practice. What the standing orders say is it would require a 2/3 majority, so we would require 2/3 to vote for the suspension of standing orders.
I'm not sure that quite answers, so what I was trying to understand it.
Point of order, Provost. Can I make a point of order that suspension of standing orders under Part 4 of Standing Orders says it's 2/3 of members present, and that would include members who abstain, so it would need to be 2/3 of the members present, which is 2/3 of 40, 37, not 37, sorry, 27.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. Scott was about just to clarify that matter.
Right, now we've got these matters, I hope, responded to. We'll proceed to the vote. Now, this is a vote on whether or not to suspend standing orders to allow discussion of the subject of instrumental music service fees. Obviously, if there is an agreement to suspend standing orders, there will be an opportunity to debate and discuss that matter, which some people seem keen to do, and that's perfectly reasonable. So that will remain an option if there is an agreement to suspend standing orders. The voting is quite simple. The motion has already been moved and seconded, and the voting is along the lines of either for the suspension of standing orders or against, or, as has been correctly raised, dissent is obviously an option. Abstention.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Can I now ask councillors to indicate when I call their name whether they're voting for or against the suspension of standing orders for this item? Councillor Ahern.
For.
Councillor Anderson.
For the motion.
Councillor Bailey.
Against.
Councillor Baird. For. Councillor Band.
For.
Councillor Barnacle.
Against.
Councillor Barrett.
For.
Councillor Braun.
For.
Councillor Brock.
Against.
Councillor Audrey Coates.
For.
Councillor Harry Coates.
For.
Councillor Donaldson.
Against.
Councillor Dugan.
For.
Councillor Drysdale.
Against.
Councillor Duff.
For.
Councillor Forbes.
For.
Councillor Gray.
For.
Councillor Illingworth.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Jarvis.
For suspension.
Councillor Lang.
Against.
Councillor Lyle. Councillor McCall.
For.
Councillor McCole.
For.
Councillor McDade. Councillor McEwen. Provost.
For.
Councillor Parrott. Councillor Pover. Councillor Purvis.
Against.
Councillor Rebeck. Councillor Reid.
For.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Sarwar. Councillor Shires. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
Abstain.
Councillor Waters. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Wilson.
For.
I have 31 votes for, 8 votes against and 1 abstention, so we therefore have a 2/3 majority to suspend standing orders for this item.
Thank you, everyone. We can now proceed to consider item 3.1 on instrumental music service, and I would ask Councillor Murray Lyle to propose a motion.
I'd just like, before Deputy Provost, to say thank you, and I'd also like to thank colleagues across the floor for allowing me to bring this motion to the Council. In 1920, the final revenue budget was approved, and in February 19 it included a proposal from the previous year's revenue budget to increase instrumental music charges for the forthcoming academic year. The financial implications of this increase in 1920 are £50,000. I ask Council to approve that the 1920 increase to charges for instrumental music services not be applied. The loss of income associated with this proposal will be funded from reserves during 1920, with the recurring impact factored into a future administration budget for 2021 and beyond, when the Council sets its next revenue budget in February 2020. Happy to move the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Baird.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I formally second the motion. Thank you.
Do we have an amendment? Do we have a comment, Councillor Dugan?
Comment.
Question? Questions?
I've got a question. Thank you,
Councillor Dugan.
Deputy
First then
Provost.
Councillor Lang.
I'm grateful to the Leader of the Council for his honest appraisal of that which has taken place in order to bring us to this situation here today. I think it is a matter of deep regret that we're here suspending standing orders in order to reverse a budget decision, as my colleague and others have pointed out, could easily have been transacted in a much more operationally calmer way. My concern, Deputy Provost, and my question is such, is that although we are adhering to the provisions that are laid down in standing orders, are we not really setting a dangerous precedent whereby the political realities of a budget decision catch up on an administration, They call it urgent and a misunderstanding, suspend standing orders and turn the clock back. Doesn't that open the door then to very flaky budget decisions going forward and an opportunity for the tail to very much wag the dog when it comes to the acceptability or otherwise of budget decisions of this council?
Councillor Dugan, that was maybe a question, but delivered a bit as a statement perhaps. I can recall several occasions over the last 20 years when different administrations of different political hues have asked for suspension of standing orders to change budget decisions. And they've been on a variety of subjects over the years, but and they've been generally agreed by council on the basis of common sense, I think. I don't know if Councillor Lyle wants to reply to that at all.
No, I've nothing to add, really. I think I've made my position clear.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you for your insight. It's by no means meant to be a compliment to say, point out that very few of us have been in this council for as long as you. I, for my own part, have been here for a mere 7 years, and I can't remember anything approaching this happening over that time frame. And can I ask a further question then, to ask what was the motivation for the administration to bring back this move to full cost recovery and not any other?
I think within the council, the administration's budget motion, we sought to diminish the impact on increased fees. You'll remember, Councillor, that there was a freeze on IMS fees for 10 years under the previous administration or administrations, and therefore there was agreement the year before to have a 20% increase. That led to a lot of discussion and debate amongst councillors and amongst the public, and that led the administration anyway to a decision that we would not want to see that increase going ahead this year. And in fact, within the budget motion of both administration and other political groups, there was a variety of options explored on the total cost recovery issue. Councillor Ling.
Just a comment. If that's okay, Deputy Provost.
Yes.
I feel that the suspension of standing orders should only be used in an emergency or for unforeseen consequences of a certain action. I'll make no comment on the ambition to keep the fees for the IMS service at the same price. This is not about the IMS service. This is about the process that's led us to this. This increase was not unforeseen. In fact, it was the direction of travel towards full cost recovery set in train by this administration in their budget setting process in February 2018. They then had a year to reverse this decision, which was on the papers all through that year. They chose not to do this. They had an opportunity with officers. They would go through their budget from the previous year, and they had the chance to revoke it and not carry it forward this year. They chose again not to do this. Their budget setting process, which the administration finally had the chance on budget day, when they realised what they were proposing, they had the chance to change it then. They didn't do it. Now, 2 months later, we've been asked to reverse this decision. This is neither emergency or unforeseen. It is a result of incompetence or a U-turn by the administration, and it's not a fit use of standing orders. I understand the administration not wanting to put charges up for the IMS service. Unfortunately, I wish they'd extended it to the higher of the community campus Astro pitches, which they've put up by 25% for young sportsmen and women who wish to hire these pitches. But there's no mention of that. This administration is quite happy to put up for the price for sport. I think it's not been widespread enough, the reversal of some of these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, which I'm sure have been noted. I would just remind everyone that we're dealing with the instrumental music service fees. Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. Actually wasn't going to say anything about this, but I think there is a point to be made. On standing orders, I've never been fully versed on it. I'm all for open debate. I think what I would say is that a number of councillors were lobbied on this issue, including myself, and we certainly were unhappy about any increase in music fees. So I think it's quite good that we're actually making this change. But I would say one thing in terms of the mechanism of changing the budget. The independent group have twice suggested that the budget process should be looked at, and we should have 1 week between proposals being put forward and then being brought back for debate and change. If this could be looked at, it might avoid this situation in the future. I just remind people of that.
And thank you for these constructive comments, and I'm sure these points will be taken into account in future budget preparations. There's certainly a deal of thought going to be given to how we deal with budgets in the future. Councillor McEwen's next.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The first thing I have is a question. Just want to clarify that I'll get a chance to comment later because you're taking questions first. You seem to be mixing up taking questions and comments at the same time.
Well, Councillor, I've asked for an amendment. There was no amendment. I'm now asking if there are any comments that folk want to make. I've had comments, some of which have been addressed as questions. We'll respond to these as best we can. However, as I've said before, in answer to Councillor McDade, it's sometimes difficult to stop somebody in mid-flow if they're asking, making a comment and designing as a question, and vice versa. If you ever find yourself in this situation, sir, and I'm sure you will at some stage, you'll understand sometimes the difficulty in doing that. Next, I've got... Was that your...
No, that was the first
okay,
part.
Well,
it's not going to be a open to say. Well, firstly, I'll start off with the comment that I
Councillor
have.
McDade, can I just take Councillor McEwen
It is a
first?
point of... Sorry, Deputy Provost, it's a point of order.
Point of order, right, okay.
Councillor Barrett has just uttered under his breath quite a rude remark about a fellow member of the council, which I think is unbecoming of a member of the council. It was within earshot of me, it might have been within earshot of others, and I would like him to withdraw that remark.
Deputy Provost, I apologise sincerely for my muttered comment and withdraw it completely and apologise to the member concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't hear the comment, but I accept the point and the apology. Now, Councillor McEwen, you want to...
All the things I've muttered under my breath.
Yep, don't mutter, yes.
The IMS is an important education service. I witnessed the benefits of this and the confidence, social skills, resilience and enjoyment and friendship that my own daughter receives by being part of this service. The Special Council, where we agreed our budget, we've not even approved the minutes yet, because that's item 4 on our agenda, and we're now wanting to change this. And the SPNR committee made the comment to the leader of the council that this motion should come to full council and not be considered by only 15 councillors. And I thank him for actually doing that and allowing all councillors of the council to comment on this. The other aspect I have to say about this is that the motion for the full council, brought together by the administration, was proposed by Councillor Lyle and seconded by Councillor Barrett. But it seems now that the Liberal Democrats don't want anything to do with this, and that we have 2 Conservatives proposing and seconding a motion here. And is it that the Liberal Democrats are just ducking and running and not actually wanting to take part in the debate on this? I'm not sure.
I'm tempted to ask for a response to that, but we'll come to that perhaps later. Councillor Rivik.
Thank you, Vice Provost. I was very reticent to vote for suspending standing orders for reasons more eloquently put than I could by Councillors Dugan and Lang. Whether it's a U-turn or an emergency is for others to decide, I guess. However, whilst literacy and numeracy will always be the bedrock in which curriculum for excellence is built, health and well-being is also a very important aspect to that. It's really important that our kids come out of school not only well educated but rounded and confident as well. And sport, drama, music and what used to be known as extracurricular activities are very important to that, and so I will be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you indeed for these comments. Councillor Drysdale and then Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. As Councillor Lang and others have indicated, this issue has shone an intense light on the competence of this administration in knowing its own budget. How can the people of Perth and Kinross have confidence in this council when they cannot get their basic sums right? Thank you.
I've Councillor McDade, then Councillor Barrett. I'm sorry. Okay. Councillor Barrett, do you want to go?
Happy to, Provost. Provost, I am pleased that this administration has sought at the earliest opportunity following the budget setting meeting to rectify the decision to continue to apply the 20% increase in charges on the instrumental music service. There has been press coverage that this is an embarrassment for the administration. It has certainly been an uncomfortable morning for me. It's not an experience that I would want to repeat. I think the Leader of the Council has honestly put up his hand and taken responsibility for the mistakes that were made within this administration, and that we have been upfront about that. But Provost, I'm thick enough skinned to cope with the fleeting political embarrassment of that, but not so thick-skinned as to put up, as not to put right the previous decision and do what is right by young people who want to practice music. And that is much more important than saving face. And that will be the lasting consequence of today's decisions, that the instrumental music service charges will not be subject to another significant rise following from last year's. That was always the intention of members of this administration. And one of the purposes of our 4% council tax increase was to provide the additional resource and flexibility to do that. Provost, my colleagues, Councillor Wilson and Councillor Lewis Simpson, because we've had questions as to whether or not the Liberal Democrats are full square behind the instrumental music service, and I can categorically state that they are. They have always been strong supporters and advocates for the benefits of to our young people that they derive from playing musical instruments, social benefits, health benefits, both physical and mental, that being part of a musical group. And developing creativity and the benefits that accrue to young people with physical and learning disabilities from being involved in the IMS2. It is also worth remembering the $35,000 per year in each of the 3 years of our budget to widen participation in the instrumental music service, to support young pipers and drummers and sustain the next generation of pipe bands in Perth and Kinross, and the work that we are doing with the Musical Foundation to provide financial support to families and make music more inclusive. So I'm very happy to support this motion, Provost, and so are all my group.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I support the broad aspiration of the motion by the Leader of the Council. I think we're seeing that broad support across the Chamber today. Anything we can do to make lives of children in Perth and Kinross better, I think we're all supportive of that. I have strong issues around suspension of standing orders, because I think it sets a dangerous precedent, and I'm well on the record about how I believe we should be keeping stricter to our standing orders, because they are there to control and make the debate fair. And I think that we need to decide if we want to have a 6-month rule, and I'd be very supportive if the Leader of the Council brought forward a proposal to scrap the 6-month rule in entirety, but I don't believe this qualifies as an emergency. I think that given that we did know about it in February 2018, that members of the administration and Leader of the Council were aware of it February 2019 and on the day of the budget, could have resolved it then, particularly given that this wasn't a particularly complex change in terms of we're taking the money from reserves, which will also take the amount that the current administration budget is going to put into reserves down to £25,000. I think going forward we need to stick much stricter to our standing orders, and I would hope that is an aspiration that will be shared by all members of this council, and that perhaps it is time that we review those standing orders to decide if they are fit for purpose.
Thank you for your contribution. We've already taken a decision on the suspension of standing orders, and there is to be a review of standing orders carried out by the officers with a report back later in the year. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'll be fairly brief. I voted against the suspension of standing orders. I've heard what Councillor Barrett has had to say, and also Councillor Lyle, and I'm glad that this has come to full council and wasn't decided at Policy and Resources last week. But there's no getting away from the fact that what has happened here demonstrates the administration has failed to do its homework. It has been slapdash, and increasingly, despite what Councillor Barrett says, I'm still puzzled as to how the administration managed to get to a 4% increase in council tax this year, next year, the year after, of 12.5% compound, and we managed to get to 3%. It really does puzzle me on some of the things.
Councillor Donaldson.
Nonetheless, I hear what Councillor Rebick and others have said.
I think we're on IMS, not
support
council
this motion.
tax. Okay. Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I believe the Council recognises the value of music tuition for our young people and the contribution that it makes to their academic attainment, their health and well-being, their confidence and a wide range of other skills. We believe that music tuition is an important part of the educational offering in Perth Kinross and want to keep it affordable and accessible to all young people. The budget decision to reject any increases in the instrumental music service and to provide more financial support for our young people from more deprived backgrounds has been widely welcomed by parents and pupils, as has the desire to reverse the previously agreed increase under discussion today. As has been stated, this situation is due to a genuine misunderstanding which the administration is now seeking to rectify at the earliest opportunity. The process which allows us to discuss this motion today, which I'm grateful has received sufficient support from colleagues across the Chamber, will permit that commitment to music tuition to be honoured and to do the decent thing for children and young people throughout Perth and Kinross. Deputy Provost, I support the motion and hope that all colleagues across the Chamber can support it too.
Thank you. I think we're going to draw to a close. Can I take Councillor James first and then you, Councillor Dugan?
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. Mine's going to be pretty quick, to be honest. We took a vote on whether we take this instrumental music service before us, and 8 people voted against allowing the suspension of standing orders. Those same 8 people have all, to what I'm hearing at the moment, are in support of actually carrying out the changes that we're asking for. Sometimes it needs somebody to stand up and say, excuse me, I have messed up here, but I'm prepared to put it right. We should be backing it. I can't see the point of political point scoring just to make a point.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Dugan, you've already asked a question, but presumably this is a comment.
Yes, it's a comment, of course, Vice Convener, Deputy Provost rather, and I'm very grateful that you brought me in after Councillor James. I can help him to understand the basics of a point of conscience. This is not about the merits or demerits of the instrumental music service. It's about the willingness and readiness to suspend standing orders for decisions which should have been transacted more competently in the first place. The two positions are entirely consistent with one another. Provost, I've listened, as we all have, to the various contributions, and one of the things that is problematic for myself, and I know it's problematic for my colleagues in the SNP, is the one-dimensional nature, the special case type scenario that we're being asked to accede to, and I, for my part, am willing to accede to it, but I would suggest in the strongest terms possible to the Leader of the Council that he may accede to an additional provision whilst we have standing orders suspended, in order to make an additional provision for another element of council service. And with your permission, Deputy Provost, I might narrate what that is in order for the Leader of the Council to take a view on whether or not he can accept that.
I'm happy for you to narrate that.
Okay, Thank you. I'd ask the Leader of the Council, Deputy Provost, in order to ensure sufficient resource, particularly to meet need over the school holiday period when this Council is in recess, that we allocate a further sum of £26,000 from reserves on a non-recurring basis to provide targeted assistance where needed to tackle periods of food insecurity for children, young people and their families in Perth and Kinross. I'd be very, very grateful if the Leader of the Council could incorporate that within his motion. Thank you.
Before I ask the Leader of the Council to respond, I think we've had ample evidence of the reasons for raising this IMS issue today. Do you want just to narrate briefly your reason for raising it as a matter of some urgency, please?
Yes, indeed. First of all, it's a priority, notwithstanding urgency or not urgency, but the urgent element of it is required, Provost, as we approach the recess, the coming recess, whereby this will ensure that there's sufficient funds available where Council is not available to make a decision on whether to allocate any funds to this priority going forward. So it's in relation to recess.
Thank you. Councillor Lyle.
I'd like to thank Councillor Duggan for his useful input, one, to the debate and for his addition to the motion, and I'm happy to incorporate it into the motion and accept the additional comment. Thank you.
Councillor Baird, as seconder of the motion, are you prepared to
Yes,
accede
I'm
to
happy
that?
to accept.
Okay. I think we've had sufficient discussion on this matter. The motion has been put. Everybody has spoken in favour of it in one form or another. There have been no amendments, and therefore I would propose that we approve the motion formally without division. Is that agreed? Thank you. We're now on item 3.2, reduction in tourism value added tax. I would remind all councillors in the room, particularly the proposer and seconder of the motion, of the advice already given by the Head of Legal Services and Governance in relation to the European elections and the purdah period there. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. The tourism sector accounts for 12% of the economy in Perth and Kinross, and thus is vitally important to businesses and jobs locally. This council has a good record of supporting the local tourism sector. The statements from the Leader of the Council earlier this year that this administration has no plans to introduce a transient visitor levy or a tourism tax, as it is otherwise known, should be welcomed by councillors from across this chamber. But while it is right to rule out future threats to the sector, we must stop to consider what might be having a detrimental impact on the sector at present. At this moment in time, we are one of only 3 countries in the European Union that levies value-added tax on tourism-related products, such as accommodation, restaurants and entertainment at the standard rate, which is 20% in the United Kingdom. Most other countries across Europe have tourism VAT set at just 5 or 10%. We therefore have the second highest rate of tourism VAT in the whole of Europe, with only Latvia being more expensive than we are. This means that the UK tourism sector is distinctly uncompetitive when compared to nearly all our European competitor countries. Unfortunately, the higher level of tourism VAT is already having a real negative impact on the tourism sector across the country. For example, the UK's share of international tourism income is falling when compared with our European competitors. In addition, the trend for domestic tourism expenditure by UK residents is downwards, and the proportion of total UK expenditure on domestic holidays relative to foreign holidays has continued to decline. Without the economic boost that cutting tourism VAT would bring, it is likely that these negative trends will simply continue for the foreseeable future. Cutting VAT on tourism-related products from 20 to 5% would go a significant way to addressing these concerns. Doing so would generate higher levels of employment in a sector that is a key employer of younger and lower skilled workers. It would boost receipts to the Exchequer, which I shall deal with in a moment. It would lead to further investment in the industry and would improve the overall quality and competitiveness of the UK's tourism offering. It would also lead to higher expenditure in other sectors of the economy through the tourism multiplier effect, which means that for every £1 of tourism expenditure, a further 70 pence of additional expenditure is generated for other sectors in the economy. And in particular, it would help small and medium-sized businesses that make up 80% of all the businesses in the tourism and hospitality sectors, for whom the high rates of VAT can be very damaging. A cross-party campaign called Cut Tourism VAT has therefore been established to lobby the UK government to reduce the rate of VAT on accommodation, restaurants and entertainment to 5%. And this is the campaign that the Council is asked to endorse today. It has supporters from all parties represented in the House of Commons, including both Pete Wishart MP and Stephen Kerr MP locally, and indeed from all parties represented in this Council today. Now, some might be concerned that a reduction in tourism VAT will not be passed on to consumers and will simply allow businesses to have increased profits. While it will certainly allow businesses to invest more in their products, employ more staff and increase their training and wages, it would indeed also lead to price cuts. A study by Copenhagen Economics of 6 countries where such a VAT reduction has already taken place found that the pass-through rate was very high, which means that the VAT cut has been passed on to consumers through lower prices. Of course, any tax cut initially comes with a cost to the Treasury, which in this case has been estimated to be £1.2 billion a year. But once the tourism VAT has been reduced, prices will be cut, leading to an increase in demand, creating more jobs and investment as the tourism sector expands. In a sector like the tourism sector, with high price elasticity of demand, strong competition and a labour-intensive production, this effect is more profound. It is therefore expected that the Treasury will recoup its investment within a 3-year period, and within 10 years there would be an annual gain of £5.3 billion to the Exchequer. In conclusion, Provost, I believe that reducing the rate of VAT on tourism-related products would have a significant positive impact on consumers and businesses alike, and would make the UK a more attractive tourism destination. If the Council were to support the motion today, it would clearly demonstrate our continued commitment to the tourism sector in Perth and Kinross, and I very much hope that all councillors from across the Chamber will be able to get behind it today. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Perth and Kinross Council area has higher than average numbers of people in employment, but a lower than average wage across Scotland. The rural economy is key to the economy of the wider Perth and Kinross Council area. Cutting VAT on the hospitality industry could support further diversification in our rural economy and investment by businesses in the tourism offer of Perth and Kinross, not least in premises and facilities, but also more than that in staff training and development, and thus providing the more highly skilled and well-paid jobs in that sector. It is worth noting, I think, that for the Rural Micro-Enterprise Fund that the Council recently agreed to set up, nearly 60% of applications to that fund have been for food, drink, tourism, health and leisure related businesses. It shows the desire and the aspiration out there of small and medium-sized businesses to develop the offering within these tourism-related sectors. But cutting the rate of VAT on tourism-related and hospitality businesses would support not only those based in the rural areas, but also support the Council's oft-quoted aspiration to develop the nighttime economy in the city centre itself. This motion seeks to put to the Treasury a position, a cross-party position from members across the Council chamber today, and it is worth noting that the Treasury has already indicated that it would keep the situation with value-added tax under review. I think it would be commendable if members across the chamber today agreed to put an agreed single position of the Council to the Treasury to input into that review. And I commend the motion to the Chamber.
Thank you. Are there any amendments to the motion? Councillor Bailey.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I find it quite fanciful to imagine the idea that a company, when given a tax break, might voluntarily use all of that money to improve the lots of its workers. And further, if we're to get VAT eligibility rules back into UK control, there's far more urgent items to be addressed. As such, I would like to propose that instead of supporting this motion, we instead support moves to remove VAT from women's sanitary products. I'd encourage colleagues to consider where money is going from and going to in this case. I, for one, am quite comfortable with reducing the end-user cost of sanitary products. I'm not comfortable with handing a tax cut to big tourism operators of the likes of Merlin Entertainment Group and Bourne Leisure, who are listed as the leaders of the Cut the Tourism VAT campaign. The only reason a company would invest in such a campaign is if they think it will help their bottom line. Therefore, I propose the following amendment. That this council acknowledges the importance of the tourism sector to the local economy, but instead instructs the leader of the council to write to the Chancellor of the Exchequer in support of the removal of VAT from women's sanitary products. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I believe I do.
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Councillor Sarwar.
Thank you. The effects of period poverty have a significant impact on women and girls across the UK every day. I am grateful to my colleague Councillor Bailey for raising this issue and for highlighting the importance of this issue. I am in agreement that if we should receive powers over changing VAT, that necessary items of female sanitary products should take priority for a VAT reduction. I'm happy to second the amendment.
Thank you. I'm going to just ask for a short pause for a moment to seek advice. Can Head of Legal Service and Governance give advice on, I think, competency? Yep.
Provost, Deputy Provost. Unfortunately, I hadn't had sight of the amendment, but unfortunately, in terms of Standing Order 42, I would have to rule it incompetent as it is not related to the business in question. It's not a relevant motion to, it's not a relevant amendment to the motion in question because it's not related. So I would recommend that this be considered incompetent.
Councillor Bailey, I'll allow you.
I would contest that it is relevant to the extent that it still relates to VAT setting policy and is proposing an alternative way of adjusting VAT setting policy. If I were to have brought this on its own in a standalone form, I wonder whether it would have been relevant.
Unfortunately, if you brought it as a standalone item, a motion during this period, pre-election period, I would have ruled it incompetent as well because it's a matter of national SNP policy, so it would be quite clearly drawn on political lines. So even as a standalone item, it wouldn't have been appropriate at this particular point.
I'm going to ask, Councillor Bailey, I'm going to ask the Provost just to make a ruling on competency based on the advice from the Head of Legal Services.
It makes it very clear in item 42. Every motion and amendment raised during debate shall be relevant to the business before the meeting, shall be moved and seconded. This point is the point that I'm coming to. Every amendment must be relevant to the motion to which it is moved. And I would agree with our Head of Legal Services that it is not relevant.
I respect that judgment, Provost. I'd like therefore to adjust my amendment, if I may. Although I'd like to also put on record my concern that I think the original motion was political as well. It doesn't have Labour Party support. I can't speak for the other parties, so therefore the other one didn't have unanimous support. It is a political campaign of sorts. However, I'd like to amend my motion to be one that essentially sorry, my microphone keeps turning off. I'd like to amend my amendment to be one that essentially just says we won't write in support of this campaign. Thank you.
Provost, could I just make a point of clarification? although it doesn't have national party support and doesn't have support necessarily from all parties, the point I made was that it has support from all parties. Supporters of all parties represented in the Commons and Labour MPs have supported the motion, just to clarify that.
Okay. I'll ask the Leader of the Council to...
Thank you very much, Deputy
give a
Provost,
response.
and thank you, Councillor Bailey. I accept the ruling from the Provost that the motion isn't competent, but I have some sympathy with the amendment, that you put forward. So therefore I would suggest that you bring it forward as a motion to the next council meeting, and I would be happy to write to both the Westminster and Scottish governments. Full stop.
Yes,
does that resolve the situation for you, Councillor
well, in
Bailey?
that case, I wonder whether the letter can't just include this.
No, I'm sorry. We've had legal advice confirmed by the Provost that it's not competent, so we can't include that.
Thank you.
I think there will be an opportunity to raise this at a future meeting, Councillor, and I suggest you do that.
Agreed, thank you, but I'd like to still put forward an amendment that removes...
Are you moving an amendment
yes,
that we do not write
yeah,
in the
correct.
terms suggested in the motion?
Correct, yes.
You need a seconder for that? Okay. Thank you, Councillor Parrott. We're now in debate. Councillor Donaldson, I'm not forgetting about you. You're next.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. First of all, I sympathise with Councillors Bailey and Sarwar. There just is no doubt a resolution on that specific matter can be brought to full council on the 19th of June. I don't think there's a problem there. I'm also conscious of the question of Purda, and I respect what Councillor Purvis and Stuart have said. I think they both made very thoughtful speeches. And I'm going to say I'm actually quite receptive to this motion, but, however, on the other hand, and there are some concerns, some reservations. I think one thing in particular, and it is this, that you can actually argue for a transient visitor levy, for a local tourism tax combined with a reduction in national VAT. And it's a transfer of tax from the national level to a local level. My concerns are on Ireland has a tax at 9% on tourism, but I think you have to be careful what you define as being tourism-related enterprises. We've seen it with foodstuffs, the ongoing jacketting debate over many years, the question of VAT on pies and bridie's, and I'm going to argue that with tourism, it makes it possibly even more complicated. And there's all sorts of possibilities, especially if you're going for a tax of 20% or 25%. The other 2 points I'd make are this. Let's say there's a reason that Martin Hotel charging £80 per night. At 20%, the inclusive charge is £96. It's a difference of £16. If you charge at 5%, you're charging £84. So there's the question there of where that £12 goes to. I would certainly argue, one, there is, if you're going to get that tax benefit, there's a good case.
Councillor,
right,
you're
very
getting
quickly,
near your
I'm just
5
going
minutes.
to conclude. There's a very strong argument for hotel staff to be paid not just the national minimum wage, but the national living wage. And I think that's something one wants to see, and I take up Councillor Stewart's comments. Thank you.
Councillor McEwen.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. In my reading for this, there's a few articles that we could talk about the subject all day. You know, we've got the House of Commons papers on this, which goes to hundreds of pages with big massive tables at the back. We've got the visit Persia, they've got the tourist board information telling us where all our tourists come from and the money they spend. And I'm sure this is the basis of which the movers brought this motion forward. The movers have demonstrated over the last few months, Deputy Provost, that they're not in complete harmony with their own administration group. And I'm surprised to see them bring forward a motion that actually supports something that's very close to my heart. Successful UK governments over the past 10 years have refused to take this issue forward, quoting unaffordability and only regional rather than widespread benefits. On the 29th of November 2018, there was a parliamentary question answered by Mel Stride MP, who's the Financial Secretary of the Treasury. This is a complex issue, affecting an important source of revenue for the Exchequer and the government, and will continue to analyse the evidence and receive representations in order to keep these issues under close review. This is parliamentary speak for kick it into the long grass. Even the House of Lords won't wake themselves up to see this paper and talk about it. Current EU law doesn't allow regions and nations within a member state to vary VAT levels, so it seems Holyrood is the means by which the evidence could be looked at, measured, and a decision made on whether this is a good thing for Scotland. And that would then have to be made in an independent Scotland.
You were bordering on, teetering on the Purda rules there, and your last sentence was
I missed out a few words
stepped over the line, Councillor McEwen. I thought we'd got the message over to everybody that we're willing to have a debate on this. It's quite possible, as Councillor Donaldson demonstrated, to have a debate on a whole range of the
I
issues
felt I
involved.
balanced out that.
No, it's okay. Just you've done it now, I think, is the answer. So we'll move on. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm fully in support of this motion on the basis that I have a much significant, as do Councillors Duff and Williamson, who share our ward, have a much significantly higher number of tourism-related businesses. It accounts for a significant part of the Highland Ward's economy, and indeed, I think Councillor Donaldson would find that £80 for a room in Highland Ward is very cheap indeed. Doubles in Pitlochry can go for £200 a night, so this would be a significant benefit to tourists coming to visit the area. I think it's quite interesting from our perspective that Pitlochry is one of the most searched destinations in Scotland, and the wider Highland Perthshire area is one of the most visited in the country for tourists. I think for the council, this motion is very beneficial because this does not cost us anything. This is us adding our weight to a cross-party campaign. And in terms of what Councillor Donaldson said about a transient visitor levy, personally at this moment in time I would not support a transient visitor levy on the basis that it will cost businesses in my ward significantly more potentially. I do support local taxation and more local taxation, and I would be much more likely to support a TVL being implemented locally where the VAT level to be reduced, and therefore there basically being a net benefit to businesses and increasing employment in the area. So I think it's a very positive motion for the council to support. I think it actually potentially opens more doors for us in the future, and I would be much more likely to be receptive to the ideas of a transient visitor levy should that be devolved at a later date to this council. So I think I'm fully in support of the motion, and I hope that members across the chamber will look to support our tourism economy in this way.
Parrott, you've indicated a request to speak. You did second the amendment. I take it that was a formal seconding, and you now wanted to say something.
Certainly, if I may.
Yes, indeed. I'm just reminding folk that of the procedure, because I'm often reminded about procedure. However, in this instance, and you seconded it formally in order to let the debate proceed.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'm mindful of the direction we've received, and it's partly because of that direction that might constrain debate that I'm persuaded to support the amendment. Firstly, I believe that there are more important VAT issues that we should be addressing at the moment. I think the tourism sector has more pressing problems in terms of labour supply and the supply chain at the moment than possibly a marginal reduction in VAT. I'd want to know more about, if you like, the replacement of lost revenue, regardless of what the proposers of the motion say about ultimate increase in revenue take. I'd want to know more about the special case for tourism. Councillor McDade has just been saying that it's almost impossible to get rooms in Lochray at certain times of the year, so I wonder what the special case is. And I'm also particularly concerned about the business of how this would affect Scotland, particularly given the assignment arrangements for VAT. So at the moment, whilst I have some sympathy, I would urge members to support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, are there any other contributions? Councillor Barnacle.
Yeah. Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm actually in support of the motion. I think it's absolutely the right approach given the economy of our area. There are actually a number of issues around VAT and its flexibility. You could also talk about removing VAT on renovating property as opposed to new build, which is a real issue, another anomaly. Whatever you may think about Brexit, if the UK leaves the EU, it may provide one benefit of giving more flexibility in relation to what may replace VAT.
Excuse me, Provost, on a point of order, we were instructed regarding the rules of PERDA. We've had members refer to independence. We're now into Brexit. You know, the rules have to be applied.
I was about
I accept that.
Councillor, I was busy making a note of who else was to speak, but it was not gone beyond my attention that we're drifting into discussions on all sorts of forms of VAT and other issues. So if those of you who intend to speak, and including yourself, Councillor Barnacle, can we please stick to the subject matter of the motion?
I accept that. I would just say I think VAT is a regressive tax, and coming back to local tourism tax, I'm actually not in favour of that. We in Kinross-shire, we've got a number of good tourist initiatives.
Councillor Barnacle, that's another drifting issue.
Yeah, 25 miles from Edinburgh, so we don't need it. Thank
you. With respect. Now, I've got Councillor Illingworth next, who's going to stick to the subject, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I've forgotten what I was going to say now. Yeah, the clue in what we do is in the name. It's local government. This is all fascinating to hear everybody's views about value-added tax, but perhaps we should remember this is a matter for Westminster, and it's a reserved matter, and we may have very many interesting views and opinions on VAT and all the other matters covered by the Westminster legislation, but actually we don't actually have a lot of influence, and perhaps it would be better if we concentrated on matters closer to home. Thank you.
Councillor Duggins next.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I've rather more confidence in the leader of the council than maybe one of his own party has, but his influence with the Treasury in London. But we'll leave that aside, as I'm very conscious of both PERDA and sticking to the point. So I'm very grateful to the mover and seconder of the motion regarding VAT. I think I'm inclined to support it on the basis that it certainly doesn't rule anything in, and the only thing it rules out is not having a view or not taking a look at this. And I think taking a look at it is it has everything to recommend it. We are in the business of recognising the economic sectors within our local economy and prioritising their development to the benefit of our communities and those seeking employment here. So if there is anything in this proposal that can do that, we should have a look at it. And I don't see any real concern in doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Robertson next, and I'm then proposing to move to summing up. Councillor Drysdale, haven't forgotten you entirely. Yeah. Councillor Robertson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I actually find this whole occasion quite sad that as a council we're faced with all sorts of pressures and difficulties, and we've got which we try to challenge, and yet we've spent the last goodness knows how long discussing something, as Councillor Illingworth said, is not really part of our remit. And it's so sad to see my fellow councillors more or less grandstanding on an item which is really not our responsibility. And I think it's almost an abuse
of this council and this office. So it's with sadness I say that, but I've been at council for a long time, and this seems to be almost a growing trend in this council. And let's take a wee bit more responsibility. Let's try and stick to what we're actually paid to do and not take this opportunity that we have, and we're privileged in this opportunity, not take it to try and make a few headlines for yourself and get your name.
Point of order. Is this not off topic? And
okay.
Well, I expect you to say that. I would expect you to say that.
And sorry, what does that mean, Councillor Robertson? Could you please clarify?
Councillor Robertson, have you concluded your remarks? Right, okay. I was about to interrupt you to suggest that you were going to conclude your remarks. Okay, right. Now, Councillor Drysdale.
Point of order, Deputy Provost, you can't allow that to continue.
Sorry, I beg your pardon. Right. Okay.
Can I ask councillors to take a deep breath? We know there's a purr. Sorry, Councillor.
Provost.
Just take a deep breath, because it's getting a bit a bit iffy here. Can you please just take it down a bit?
Provost, you've handed the chair over at the moment. Can you let the Deputy Provost deal with it, please? Could you let the Deputy Provost deal with it?
I've received advice, Councillor Robertson, that your remarks were disrespectful to me. If you wish to withdraw these, I would appreciate it.
Nobody loves you more than me, Deputy Provost, so I take these comments back if you took offence.
I think just before I come to Councillor Drysdale, and we'll get to you very soon, in the heat of debate and discussion sometimes remarks are made that are maybe not appreciated by others. Can we just try and stick to the subject matter and stick also to being polite, even although we disagree with folk? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I have, whilst I have a degree of sympathy for the motion before us today, I do have severe reservations about the practicality of what is being considered here. I purchase entertainment tickets locally. I've even been known to attend the odd restaurant locally. But I'm not a tourist, so I cannot see how something as worded in this motion can fly. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Councillor Gray, and then I'm going to come to summing up. Okay. I think everybody's had a fair chance to speak.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I was quite intrigued when the original motion came forward and the seconder, the 2 points raised, because exactly where my train of thought was. I thought tourism is a luxury which must be paid for by those who can afford it. It is not a right. Enough of all the people cannot even afford certain rights, far less tourism. And it is just possible that VAT from tourism will help filter back to those who cannot afford even the meals on their table. I do not support the motion. I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Purvis, would you like to sum up, please?
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I'd just like to pick up on a few points that have been raised in the debate. Councillor Donaldson said that you could hold the view of supporting a tourism tax locally, but this motion for reducing VAT, and he is absolutely right in that fact. And I know that some colleagues in the Liberal Democrats and some colleagues in the SNP do hold that position of supporting the tourism tax. And while we might not agree on that, I would just like to reiterate that the motion does not give a view on the tourism tax itself. So it's perfectly possible for councillors to support this motion while only supporting the reduction in tourism VAT, even if they might support a transient visitor levy. Also, we've had some councillors raise the issue of it's not something for this council to discuss, and the agenda was quite short today, so I thought I would bring something to add to it for everyone. But while it is not our responsibility we are putting forward our own view about what we think is best for our local economy, and that is perfectly legitimate. A campaign does need supporters and people who are willing to put their head above the parapet and say that they think this is the right thing to do, both for our local economy and also for the national economy. So I do think it is right for this council to take views on things that might not be within our competence. Also, there have been concerns about the fact that VAT reductions might be better placed elsewhere and on other products and services earlier on. As I outlined, and I know Councillor Parrott and others have said they would like to see more detail on the calculations and costings, and those are available on the campaign website if you have a look at that. But there was a forecast net gain to the Treasury of £5.3 billion over 10 years. So this additional revenue may indeed allow for other VAT cuts in other areas that might be of priority to some councillors, or indeed to fund public services or different things as well. And in addition, there have been concerns raised from Councillor McEwen and others about the fact that the distinction, and also by Councillor Donaldson, between what counts as tourism product and what doesn't. Obviously, if the Treasury were to introduce something like this, there would be the usual consultation process, talking to businesses and individuals and other people to get their views about how this would be implemented. And I think that it's very important to stress that would happen before the introduction of this VAT reduction. So with those points of clarification, just once again, I would like to urge all councillors to support this cross-party campaign, which, as I've said, has support from all parties represented in this chamber, from members of Parliament, and hope that we can agree to support this motion today. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now proceed to the vote. Councillor Forbes, is this
Sorry,
a point
just
of order?
a quick question. May I ask for clarification of what the amendment was?
You'll get that in a moment.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We're dealing with item 3.2 on the agenda. We have a motion from Councillor Purvis, seconded by Councillor Stewart, the terms of which are set out on the agenda. We have an amendment from Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Parrott, to reject the proposal that is set out in the motion. Can I ask councillors to indicate, when I call out their name, whether they're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Amendment.
Councillor Baird. Councillor Band. Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Harry Coates.
Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Dugan. Motion. Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray. Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lang.
Motion.
Councillor Lyle. Councillor McCall. Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen. Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott. Councillor Pover. Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson. Councillor Sarwar. Councillor Shires. Councillor Simpson. Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters. Councillor Williamson. Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Deputy Provost, I have 29 votes for the motion and 11 votes for the amendment, so the motion is therefore carried.
Thank you. Can we now move on to item 3.3, voting rights religious representatives on the Lifelong Learning Committee, and invite Councillor McDade to propose the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Following the submission of this motion, the European Union elections were announced, and following further legal advice from the Head of Legal and Governance, I've slightly amended my motion and I've provided copies for committee services to distribute at this meeting. It is a very minor amendment in a few points, and I shall point them out.
Okay, we'll arrange for these to be circulated if you'd like to resume your seat just for a moment. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor McDade, you maybe just want to emphasise the change that you've made, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. There has been considerable amount of public debate around some of the issues relating to this motion, not least about the recent decision by the Lifelong Learning Committee to close Blairengone Primary School. I want to be absolutely clear, despite my views on that matter, this motion is not seeking to revisit that decision, nor is it looking to rehearse the arguments of that decision, or indeed how anyone voted during that decision. It is quite simply a matter of democracy. The question is whether this council believes in unelected individuals having voting rights over matters of public policy. Over the past 2 years since I joined the council, I'm aware of a number of councillors, including me, who have asked if the 3 representatives appointed to the Lifelong Learning Committee under the Local Government Scotland Act 1973 were required to have a vote. And the advice we received at the time was that yes, they were. So this is not a new issue, but the reason we're discussing it today is that 2 weeks ago the Scottish Government clarified their view that although the council is required to appoint certain representatives under the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, it is the council to decide whether those representatives are given a vote or not. As a result of that clarification, I filed the motion we're discussing today because it's my fundamental belief that I do not that no one who is unaccountable to the electorate should be able to vote on public policy. This is not a new position, it's something I've campaigned on in terms of replacing unelected peers and having a democratically elected second chamber, but that is not in the control of this council. The voting rights of committees in this council are. I would like to keep this debate to that fundamental point, that those who hold elected office should have a vote. As I move the motion today, I have decided to amend the wording slightly following further advice, and it's very much focused on that fundamental principle that is now reflected by the motion by changing the words religious representatives to non-elected members, and I've also removed the specification of that part of the Act out as well. I believe that the stakeholder members of all our council committees provide valuable contributions and help inform the debate, and this motion in no way changes their ability to do that. Rather, it asks for them to all be treated the same and apply the fundamental democratic principle that only those elected by the people of Perth and Kinross should have a vote on matters affecting the people of Perth and Kinross. I hope a majority of elected members will support this motion today and resolve that this council believes that only those accountable to the people should have a vote on matters affecting them. Thank you.
Thank you. And your second is Councillor Barnacle. Carry on, please.
Yeah, thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm happy to second my colleague's amended motion. As he said, the motion really results from the outcome of vote at the Lifelong Learning Committee last month, when the decision was made to close a rural school in my ward. Until the conclusion of the so-called consultation on closure, I'd not been fully aware of the role of unelected representatives on the committee.
Councillor Barnacle, can I remind you that the amendment actually quite clearly stated that this was not about revisiting the decision of the lifelong committee. I think Councillor McDade was absolutely clear in terms of what his motion was, and you don't appear to be seconding that.
I think I am.
No. Wait, this is quite clear. Councillor McDade, you may want to clarify exactly what your motion is.
Yeah, I think I was quite...
Thank you. If you'd like to resume your seat for a moment, please.
Yeah.
Councillor Barnacle, we could ask Councillor McDade to clarify the situation.
Absolutely very clear that given the situation with Purda, the motion has been amended very clearly to be very explicit about that this is the principle that we are looking at and asking for the revised changes based on that principle. And I think the arguments of the Blaine and Gone decision have been well rehearsed, and we're not looking to seek to reopen that discussion. We are seeking to change this point of policy.
Thank you for that clarification. Councillor Barnacle, by all means proceed, but would you please keep in mind the points that Councillor McDade has just made and made in his
Thank you. I'll say nothing further about the outcome of the vote. I think I support the sentiment of the motion in its entirety. Thank you.
We have the motion proposed and seconded. Do we have an amendment? Councillor Shires.
I have an amendment, Deputy Provost.
We'll arrange for that to be circulated. Okay, Councillor Shires. Can we have a wee bit of shush, please?
Thank you, Deputy Provost. In proposing this amendment, I'd like to start by thanking the religious representatives and indeed the teachers and youth reps who serve on the Lifelong Learning Committee for all their willingness to represent various groups of stakeholders in Perth and Kinross. And I'm looking forward to welcoming parent representatives to the committee in due course. Since this motion was put forward for discussion, I have, and I'm sure many of my colleagues have too, been looking at how other councils operate and the national legislation, and much of it which appears to be outdated and unclear. And I fully intend on raising this with MSPs and the Scottish Government to encourage them to update their legislation and guidance to councils. Over 12 years as a councillor, and a number of them as a member of the Lifelong Learning Committee and now as convener, I've seen our religious representatives on education matters vote with the administration, current and previous, and against the administration, current and previous. I'm more than happy to be part of a discussion about the role and status of the religious representatives, but this must be done as part of the review of governance within the council. I've already discussed with officers the name of the Lifelong Learning Committee to better reflect the functions of the committee, and following the current best value audit, I would want to see the MOG examine the scheme of delegations and standing orders, and for the voting rights of the religious representatives to be a part of that. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Thank you. Your seconder, Councillor Duff.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Religious representatives have had a statutory role in education committees for 90 years, and we should recognise the continued service, the strong commitment and the positive contribution that they have made to education over that considerable period. They are carefully selected, often for their experience in the field of education. I believe that religious representatives exercise their vote conscientiously and diligently, with a deep reflection of the issues involved and a careful consideration of how that vote should be. Sometimes for the administration and sometimes against it. However, I appreciate that things can and often do change. The question before us today is how any such change should be considered. Should it be a reflex reaction to the outcome of one of these votes, or should it be a result of a measured and considered review of the governance arrangements for this council? This amendment therefore proposes its consideration as part of a wider strategic review of the scheme of administration and council standing orders by the Modernizing Governance Member Officer Working Group, and I feel that this is a more prudent and considered reaction to the issue at hand. I'm pleased to second this amendment.
Thank you. Before we proceed any further, could I ask Councillors McDade and Barnacle, having heard the speeches and the amendment, would you be willing to accept the amendment as an alternative solution to your motion, or do you wish to
No,
press on?
I want to proceed to a
Thank you.
voting discussion.
Okay, that's fine. Contributions. I see Councillor Sarwar first.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I'll just wait for... There we go. I believe that this motion is not about reducing the influence of religious reps. In fact, I welcome the contribution to Lifelong Learning Committee and hope we will hear more from them and all our other non-voting reps during our discussions and debate. However, as elected members, we are held accountable by members of the public for our decisions and the way we vote. This motion, in my eyes, is about bringing transparency and accountability to voting on the Lifelong Learning Committee. I'm grateful to my colleagues for the work done on this motion and for the clarification they've managed to secure from the Scottish Government. In the light of this clarification, I do not see the need at the moment for a working group. We'll just be kicking this decision down into the grass. For this reason, I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Councillor McDade has expressed concern about setting a precedent by suspending standing orders today. I have some concerns too about making knee-jerk decisions in the heat of the moment. Those decisions will be with us for a very long time. I do also have concerns, though, that the church reps have a vote, yet other non-elected members, such as teachers and young people, do not have a vote. The solution to this anomaly is not to remove the vote from the church representatives. The solution lies in a clear review of all of the options open to us, taken in a constructive way with clear heads, and that's what we should do.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I fully appreciate the amendment that Councillor McDade has come forward and highlighting that this is not about the religious reps or anything like that.
Did you mean the motion, Councillor?
Motion, sorry.
Okay.
I thought the changes were the amendment. This is now the motion.
Okay, that's okay. The amended motion. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for the clarity with that. I'm fully supportive of this core motion. You know, I believe that within any healthy democracy, it is essential that there is a democratic accountability with people that are making decisions. I'm trying to stay off any Blair and Gone stuff here, by the way. You know, but there were certainly issues highlighted recently where part of our democratic process failed, where a decision was made where the elected members made one decision and unelected members meant representatives went the decision switched the opposite way to the closing of a school.
Councillor, you're straying into
I'm trying not to.
dangerous territory.
Right.
Would you please desist from You said a minute or two you weren't going to stray into that territory, and then you promptly did it. Would you like to just withdraw these?
My apologies.
We accept the apology, but would you like to withdraw these remarks from the debate, because I
will withdraw the mention of Blair and Gun School. I tried not to remember the school, mention the school, but I'll withdraw it.
Well, you're
yep, it's withdrawn.
The expression digging a hole, but Lisa, would you please give us your benefit of your advice?
I think I've given my advice several times, and I think my advice is clear, and I think my position is understood.
Yeah.
Just behave.
Okay, sorry. I was just trying to... Yeah, I'll shut up. I just fully supportive of the motion. It's not about religious reps or anything like that. It's about a democratic process that people who are elected to represent communities should be making the decisions that affect these communities, and any accountability comes back to the elected representatives that are making the community. So I'm fully supportive of the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Braun is next.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I had intended to speak against the motion, but I appreciate Councillor McDade's changes that he's made to widen the question of non-elected representatives. But unfortunately, it does affect the religious representatives in this case, because they are the only non-elected members who have a right to vote. For me, and it's a personal opinion, the religious representatives are in place to try to ensure that the youngest members of our society get an education which includes, for want of a better description, a moral compass on which to build their future. And as such, they should have a full involvement in the education matters of the said committee. However, the real point of concern, Deputy Provost, here is this, and I have the greatest concern. The right to vote, wherever that may be or in whatever circumstance, is something to be guarded and should never be taken away in such a manner as this. I don't know how members feel about this or about the events of the previous committee, but if there are to be changes to voting rights, then this is not the way to do it. Depriving any representative, whoever they are, of their right to vote should be done by due process, which should, in my opinion, include at least the option for them to have the right to reply. Thank you, Deputy Provost.
Next, Councillor Rebick.
Thank you, Vice Provost. I welcome the many contributions we have from reps beyond the Lifelong Learning Committee's elected members. We have teachers reps, unions reps, student reps, religious reps, and soon to be very welcome parents reps as well. They give of their time generously, freely in some cases. Their contributions are to be welcomed. However, there is a point of democracy here. The only people that sit in Lifelong Learning Committee that have to answer for the votes that they make are the elected members, and therefore I shall be supporting Xander McDade's motion on this matter.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. I would say that it's totally invaluable, the contributions from all representations, from all the organisations that attend lifelong learning. I do not question their expertise and experience. However, it's the elected members that are democratically elected that should be voting, not unelected members. So therefore, I would support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barrett.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. And I think before I speak to the motion, I think I am concerned that there seems to be in this chamber an attitude that the Purdah rules are a boundary to be pushed or a line to be crossed. And I think members need to get a hold of their conduct and adhere to the rules. Deputy Provost, I would be loath to follow the precipitous course of action set out in the motion before us from Councillors McDade and Barnacle, a motion which is completely devoid of any justification for the removal of voting rights for which have been democratically awarded to religious representatives on the committee, and which they have practiced responsibly and in good conscience without criticism until last month for 2 decades. Removing entrenched voting rights is not something to be entered into lightly, as the mover and the seconder of this motion would have us do. Neither is leaping from the mainstream practice in Scotland, which is for religious representatives to have the power to vote on items on the agenda. And frankly, Provost, if I were a religious representative, if votes were to be rescinded without any prior consultation or conversation, I would consider that to be a deliberate slap in the face, a very poor reward for dedicated voluntary service and contribution to education in Perth and Kinross, and it would cause me to consider whether to continue to serve in future. The thrust of the motion seems contrary to the principles of community empowerment and the broader community participation in decisions of this council, and for me it is a retrograde step and one that smacks of paternalism and elitism at best, or political vengefulness and retribution if looked at in a more unforgiving light. Provost, matters regarding amendments to the scheme of administration have not, in my experience, been carried out in bald and bland motions to council, but in response to proper processes led by the Chief Executive, the Head of Democratic Services and the Council's Monitoring Officer, with engagement with elected members and reference to the Modernising Governance Member Officer Working Group, and that is the way to get properly considered proposals and appropriate consultation with stakeholders, and that is how any merits, and I see none so whatsoever, and how the many demerits and flaws of this proposals should be weighed and tested. I support the amendment, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor McEwen.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. When we were elected to this council, one of the first roles we have to do is we meet as in our groups, and we're given a list of committees that we have to be part of, and then we're told proportionally how many members we are to have on those committees. And we've had arguments and decisions and changes in this year regarding the number of people on different committees relating to different people moving from administration and then out of administration, and that changing the mathematics of it all. So it's obviously we hold this very closely, and it's a very important thing for us to do to ensure that each committee represents proportionally how the people of Perth and Kinross vote on their matters and the representatives sent here. And I know myself as a councillor, and I see it in every councillor in this room, that we take all the information that comes to us regarding any matter that we're looking at very seriously. Some of the language I've just heard I found obnoxious, but I see every single councillor taking every single option, whether it's a parent council, whether it's a community group, whether it's a member of their own constituency. We all take this information on board when we are making our decisions. As others have said, the roles and responsibilities of what I think should be voting members on the Lifelong Learning Committee are as important as any of the information we have in our papers from officers or from any of our self-held opinions of our own. So therefore, the talk about us not holding these representatives in not any regard is again false. We hold them in the highest regard. They represent our communities and they represent the opinion and facts that we must balance when we make our decisions. But the final point on all this is that the councillors should be the ones who make these decisions, because we are accountable. And we have been given the responsibility to take on board all the information to us for this. And I believe that any councillors on the Lifelong Learning Committee would wholeheartedly listen to any representatives there to ensure that their views and their opinions on things are expressed and how we balance up our decision making. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Before I make the comments I was intending to make, I would just like to say that whilst fully accepting the conventions around Purdah, I don't think that we should be taking lectures in this chamber from somebody who's already had to apologise for his behaviour in this very meeting. What I was going to say is that this council participates in a very important and successful committee called the Integration Joint Board of Perth and Kinross. In that IJB, we have a service users rep, we have carers reps, and we also have other representation as well. The councillors, the elected councillors, are the only ones who cast their vote on behalf of Perth and Kinross Council, and there is already an operating model there that works successfully, and we should replicate that in the Lifelong Learning Committee.
Councillor Lang, and then maybe going to proceed to summing up, Councillor Purvis.
Thanks, Deputy Provost. I'm very disappointed the way this debate has gone, despite the best, on all sides of the debate, despite the best advice from legal services. We keep referring to a committee and a committee decision on both sides of the argument. This has nothing to do with any previous decision. This is to do with the change that brought this around, no knee-jerk to anything, was the fact that the previous advice we'd always got, I served in a lifelong committee in the past term, was that there was statutory rights, voting rights, for the religious representatives. This has changed. This is what's changed. Nothing outside of this has changed. No meetings, no decisions, nothing. That's the change. That's why this has been brought forward, because now the advice we've got is it is not a statutory right that we have to uphold. We have the choice. We have the choice whether we should be the sole decision makers on policy. Now, they do add and give a different concept, but so do the youth reps, so do other reps, so do stuff you read in the press, so do parent councils, as somebody said. They all feed into what we take in. We make the decision. We have to go out to the parent councils and face them up with the decisions. I'm quite happy if any of my colleagues on either side of the chamber make a decision. I'll go and argue why that decision's been taken, because we are elected to stand by these people, and they can kick us out. We have to take it seriously. I think we should take all their advice. I think we have to take this new advice from legal services that we do not have to have, that it's not a statutory obligation, it's something we should take in our own hands. I think we should do it now when we're all here, 40 of us. It shouldn't be something that 4 or 5 people bring forward and decide amongst them, because they could be, we don't know how widespread the view. All 40 of us here are elected. All 40 of us should make this decision now, and I'll be supporting the motion.
I'm not going to attempt to respond to bits of the debate, but purely on a factual basis, Councillor Ling, the MAUG recommendations always come to the full council, the full committee and full council for approval, as you are well aware. Okay. Councillor Purvis is next.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Just to say first, after Councillor Drysdale's comments, I'm very much looking forward to the elections for the board of the NHS Tayside. But just moving on to the matter in question, I'm very supportive of the motion that's been brought forward today. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. I, for one, have always held the view that religious representatives should not have the vote, and that voting rights should be restricted to elected members only, as has been outlined by Councillor McDade and Councillor Laying. Up until this point, I, and I believe many other councillors, thought that it was a requirement for us to allow religious representatives to have the vote. Since then, the Scottish Government have clarified that this is not the case. So we're taking this decision today in full view of the facts. I'd like to echo the comments that have been made by various councillors, saying that we very much value the contributions of non-elected representatives. But the question here is a point of principle. It's not about whether the representatives might vote sometimes with this administration or with the previous one, or against in either case. But the question is that only the people who are accountable to the electorate should have the right to vote on matters of public policy. And that's a very simple principle, and one that I think we should all support in this chamber today. I think that the amendment, unfortunately, just seeks to kick this issue further into the long grass, and I echo the comments about the Member Officer Working Group. While the recommendations do indeed come to the full council, it often seems like a done deal before it gets here. I, for one, feel that we have sufficient information to make this decision today, and will be supporting the motion so that only elected representatives have a vote on a democratic committee.
Thank you very much, Deputy Provost. I've listened carefully to the debate of members across the chamber, and I will come back on a few points. I think, and I felt anyway, that the amended motion was very clear that this is about a point of principle. You either believe in the primacy of elected representatives, elected by the people to represent people who are accountable to the people and can be removed from office. I thought that was clear, and I'm quite happy to reassert that as the position. And that is what we are seeking to do here. This is an anachronism that currently stands. I think, from my point of view, I'm just going to pick up on some of the other points. Councillor Forbes talked about this being a knee-jerk reaction. This is not a knee-jerk reaction. It was in response to changed advice that was submitted just over 2 weeks ago, and the motion was written as soon as that advice came out. And I think that was very helpful advice, and I think that in terms of some of his other suggestions, I would refer him to the Local Government Scotland Act 1973, which would prevent us from giving voting rights to people who aren't actually eligible to be local authority councillors, and some of the people that he's mentioned wouldn't be eligible, and therefore you'd have even more of a mess potentially. This is absolutely due process. Some under the impression that this is not due process. This is the highest governing body of this council. This is where this decision should and absolutely should be taken and must be taken. We are all democratically elected, we are all accountable, and the decision we take should be the decision that stands. And that should be the case in all our committees, and that is what we're seeking to achieve here. Councillor Barrett referenced to the religious representatives that they have been elected. Only one of them was appointed by the committee. The other two are nominated by their specific churches. And that is what is set down in the legislation, and we have no ability to alter that. And I think from my point of view, I'm quite surprised actually that a number of members who I would have thought, given that their national party policies for things such as House of Lords reform would have supported such a move, are not supportive of it today. Anyway, I shall now move the motion that's in my name, and hope all councillors will think very carefully about this point of principle about whether elected members should be the only one deciding public policy.
Okay, thank you. We'll now move to the vote.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. We're dealing with item 3.3 on the agenda. We have a revised motion by Councillor McDade, seconded by Councillor Barnacle. We have an amendment by Councillor Shires, seconded by Councillor Duff, the terms of which have been circulated. Can I remind councillors that voting will be by roll call, so when I call out your name, can you indicate whether you're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Ahern.
Amendment.
Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Bailey.
Motion.
Councillor Baird. Amendment. Councillor Band. Motion. Councillor Barnacle. Motion. Councillor Barrett.
Amendment.
Councillor Braun.
Amendment.
Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Amendment.
Councillor Harry Coates.
Amendment.
Councillor Donaldson.
Motion.
Councillor Dugan. Motion. Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Duff.
Amendment.
Councillor Forbes. Amendment. Councillor Gray. Motion. Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor Jarvis.
Amendment.
Councillor Lang. Motion. Councillor Lyle.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall. Amendment. Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McDade.
Motion.
Councillor McEwen. Motion. Provost.
Amendment.
Councillor Parrott.
Motion.
Councillor Pover.
Motion.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Rebeck.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Sarwar.
Motion.
Councillor Shires.
Amendment.
Councillor Simpson.
Amendment.
Councillor Stewart.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Motion.
Councillor Williamson.
Motion.
Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
I have 21 votes for the motion and 19 votes for the amendment, and the motion is therefore carried.
Provost, that concludes at some length the item 3, and I hope everyone in the room will agree that we can, with your agreement, Provost, that we'll adjourn for lunch.
Thank you, Deputy Provost. Yes, we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock. Councillors, are we all here? We'll get started. Right, item 6, page 21 is the Treasury Activity and Compliance Report. My apologies, wrong page. Item 4, minutes. Can we agree the minute of the special meeting of the Council of the 20th of February 2019? And can we agree the minute of the meeting of the Council of the 27th of February?
Provost, can I ask a question on the minutes, please?
Certainly.
Thank you. Page 51, item 113, the EU exit. To request the UK Government Secretary of State for Scotland to convene a meeting with ESAC. I was wondering if he has written to the Secretary of State.
Councillor Lyle.
Thank you very much, Provost. Just to say that following the previous full council meeting, I did write to the Secretary of State, David Mundell, and I have yet to receive a reply.
Thank you for doing that, Councillor Lyle. When did you send that letter off? It seems a lengthy time for him not to respond.
I don't recall the exact date, but it was reasonably soon after, possibly the following week, I suggest, after the last council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we agree the minute of the meeting of the Council 27th of February 2019? Thank you. Item 5 is the minute of meetings of the committees from the 13th of February to the 2nd of April 2019. And can we agree to note the minutes of the Common Good Fund committees of the 27th of February? Planning and Development Management Committee, 13th of February.
Happy to move the paper.
Happy to second.
Thank you. Licensing Committee, 21st of February.
Happy for noting. Happy to second.
Thank you. Local Review Body, 5th of March.
Move for noting, Provost.
Planning and Development Management Committee.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Housing and Communities Committee, 20th of March.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Environment and Infrastructure Committee, 20th of March.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Audit Committee, 27th of March.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second.
And Local Review, Lifelong Learning, 27th of March.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
And the Local Review Body, 2nd of April.
Move for noting, Provost.
Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, councillors. Item 6, Treasury Activity and Compliance Report 2018-19, Quarter 4. If you need the page, it's 211. And I invite Stuart Mackenzie, Head of Finance, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Provost, and good afternoon, Council. This report advises Council of Treasury activity undertaken during the quarter ended 31st of March 2019. The Public Works Loans Board rates, which determined the Council's borrowing costs, fluctuated over the quarter, as set out in Appendix 1, but fell towards the end of March, as the financial markets reacted to the parliamentary debate on Brexit. In total, £20 million of new borrowing was undertaken during the quarter in accordance with the requirements of the approved capital programme and in the context of historically low borrowing rates. Given the scale of the Council's general fund and housing capital budgets over the coming years, opportunities for borrowing will be kept under review. The Council's long-term debt, therefore, increased from £364 million to £384 million over the quarter. Appendix 2 shows the average interest on long-term debt reduced from 3.26% to 3.2%. The position is constantly updated, but on a comparable basis, this represents a saving of £238,000 on annual interest if had the rate remained as reported in December. Apologies, sorry.
Investment activity was undertaken in accordance with the Council's cash flow requirements. The total level of investments increased from £44.4 million to £50.8 million, in part due to new borrowing. The average interest generated on investments increased from 0.94% to 1.01%, with total investment income approximately £95,000 greater than in the previous quarter. There were no breaches in compliance with Treasury investment policy, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. Following a change in the Treasury team, Council is requested to approve the updated schedule of named officers and responsibilities set out in Appendix 4. A report summarising all Treasury activity for financial year 2018-19 will be submitted to Council in June. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you, Stuart. Are there any questions of the report? Councillor Drysdale.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, can I congratulate the Head of Finance on the continuing prudent financial management that this local authority benefits from, as evidenced by the drawing down of loans in March and the subsequent increase in rates as Brexit uncertainty continues. I just had one question, just really for clarification. Reference is made at 3.3 under Treasury activity to a transaction in relation to SALIX interest-free loans. I'm just wondering how much does the Council borrow on an interest-free basis from SALIX, and under which category does that appear on the tables in Appendix 5?
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale, for your comments. First off, thank you for the compliment. I'll feed that back to the team. It's much appreciated. In terms of SALIX, it's for street lighting and energy efficiency. It was an interest-free loan organised through an arrangement with the UK Treasury, which was offered to all local authorities, so we took that up. In terms of the total borrowing, it wasn't a huge amount, but I don't have a figure to hand. I will get that back to you. And in terms of the categories under Appendix 3, in terms of approved investment counterparty list, effectively because the money was offered to us interest-free, there isn't effectively a counterparty arrangement. There's no risk to us. The money was borrowed by the Council on an arrangement through the UK Government.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? Councillor Donaldson. I was expecting you, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. Can I just say first, I think it's the first time, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you've done this, but on schedules 5.3 and 5.4, I think that's very helpful, setting out the roles, responsibilities of the team and also the authorisation limits. I think that's actually useful. I also think it might be useful with regard to other reports from other areas of the Council. Very simple, deceptively simple question, but it's a genuine one. Just for this year, I'm not going to ask you to project 5-10 years ahead, just for this year, what are your projections, what are your feelings on the future trend of interest rates overall? And obviously, Public Works Loan Board is based on UK gilts.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Like the Provost, I was expecting a question, but perhaps not that one, in fairness. In terms of the, just perhaps to address the issue of roles and responsibilities, those are set out in the Treasury Management Practices document, which I understand is on the elected members' website. And I brought to Council simply because we've had a change in personnel. We have named officers, so that's why we're brought on this occasion. In terms of looking forward, it's been a particularly volatile period because of, largely driven by the uncertainties around Brexit, which, as you'll be aware, is impacting on the financial markets. So we're looking at a position daily. We get the rates twice daily, in the morning and in the afternoon. What we've seen over the last few weeks has been a little bit of a settling of rates as we move during a parliamentary recess. As we move forward, one might expect the rates to begin to fluctuate a little bit more. However, at the moment we're experiencing historically low borrowing rates, so moving forward we're expecting rates around about the 2.4 to 2.5% on long-term borrowing, moving up over the course of the next few years.
So just you don't see much variation. It's quite important, you know, if eventually new capital projects come through, we've yet to see anything on that front, in addition to what's already there in the budget. But you don't, I think it's particularly noticeable in 20, 30, 50-year money, you know, there's not a massive divergence. You see these that remaining much the same, the relationship between that type of money.
Thank you, Councillor Dodson. I was just referencing back to an appendix, not to this report, but actually to the Council's capital report considered by Council in February, which looked at average rates for different periods of borrowing. We're basically budgeting around about the 3% mark and expect that figure to increase. On average, expect that figure to increase over a period of time. So it's an extremely volatile period I would expect over the next few weeks, perhaps few months. We might see significant movements. If we do, we would seek to take advantage of that because we're borrowing at fixed term loans. If the rates move in the other direction, then obviously we'd look at what our alternatives might be at that point in time. But historically, borrowing at 2.5%, 2.6, 2.7 is effectively very, very, I hate to use the phrase cheap money, but it's cheap money.
Yeah, thanks. And indeed, it's remarkable if you look back 20, 30 years. But thank you.
Thank you, Stuart. I must admit, I think everybody here was quite interested to see how your crystal ball would be looking at in that particular regard. Is there any other Councillor Parrott?
Thank you, Provost. Again, I note on paragraph 3.2 the requirement in March to borrow 20 million and the rates at which that was borrowed. Can you say a bit more about, if you like, if we have a borrowing requirement in April, how far ahead can we borrow that to take advantage of good rates? What is the freedom of manoeuvre in terms of when we borrow against requirements? That's I don't understand. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. I'm happy to explain it a little bit further in the context of thinking about our position moving forward. So, in essence, there is no restrictions on the Council borrowing in advance of need. What limits that is really the practicalities of managing the cost of carrying money. So it costs us more to borrow than we will get in an investment return, because the investment returns are not particularly high at the moment. And also there's an element of risk around investing a significant amount of money. But there would be no reason why the Council wouldn't seek to take advantage of the low cost of borrowing at the moment, bearing in mind that we have a capital programme which comes to, including the housing revenue account, some £700 million over the next 10 years. So there's no particular strictures on holding money in advance of that.
So if I may make the comment that good judgment takes precedence over strictly applied time limits.
Yes, effectively, yes.
Okay. Any other comments? No? Okay. Councillor Lyle, can you move the report?
Thank you very much, Provost. This report provides a summary of the Treasury management activity for the final quarter of 18-19, ending the 31st of March 19. During the quarter, there was further new borrowing of 20 million to support the delivery of the capital budget. This was borrowed at low interest rates over various terms up to 50 years. This reduced the average borrowing rate payable on the council's debt. Prior to this, there was also some short-term borrowing to assist the council's cash flow earlier in the quarter. Investment activity included an increased level of fixed-term investments due to a positive cash flow in the latter part of the quarter and the long-term borrowing. Short-term investments were mostly undertaken through notice accounts and money market funds in accordance with the council's cash flow requirements. I must add there were no breaches in compliance with the council's treasury management policy, whilst the prudential indicators remain within their limits. This report also proposes to update treasury management personnel structure and authorisation limits to reflect the change in the officers in the team. I would ask the council to note the report and to approve the updated treasury management structure and authorisation limits as shown in Appendix 4 of the report. Happy to move.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, would you like to second the report?
Thank you, Provost. In accordance with Treasury Management Practice 6, the Council is required to report on its borrowing and lending activities and compliance with Treasury Management Practices TMP 4, and to report the working list of approved counterparties and lending limits, along with the Treasury Advisor's recommended maximum lending period with each counterparty, and that's detailed in Appendix 3. There have, as the Leader of the Council have informed us, been no breaches in compliance during the quarter. The average rate on loans fell from 3.26% to 3.2%, and that's detailed in Section 3.3, which also reports the repayment of the first instalment of a interest-free loan from Salix. Salix is funded by the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, the Department for Education, the Welsh Government and the Scottish Government, and established as an independent, publicly funded company dedicated to providing public sector with loans for energy efficiency projects. Appendix 4 provides members with the detail of the updated Treasury Management Organisational Chart, roles and responsibilities and authorisation limits, and I'm happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? Do you agree the report? Thank you. Item 7 is the cessation of membership of the Dovetail Enterprises 1993 Limited. It's on page 235. Can I invite Jim Valentine, Deputy Chief Executive, to introduce the report?
Thank you, Provost. Councillors, the report before you explains the background to the company known as Dovetail Enterprises, a company who for decades have provided employment opportunities for blind, visually impaired and disabled people across the Tayside area, manufacturing and selling their blind craft products. Following the dissolution of Tayside Regional Council, Perth Kinross maintained 3% of the voting rights of the company, but the council has never sought to use these rights and has not fielded a board representative in recent years. While the company have continued to take over, it has now reached a stage where significant investment is required in order for it to continue to compete in the market for the products it produces and therefore meet its employability outcomes. In order to find this investment, the company has been in discussion with the Shaw Trust, a company with whom this council has had a positive relationship with in the past at Westbank Depot, with a view to the trust acquiring the business to enable the necessary investment to be made to allow the Dovetail business to stabilise and then grow. The Shaw Trust are extremely interested in the company's potential, and a proposed merger was agreed at the company meeting of the board on the 7th of February. In order for the merger to go forward, however, it is essential that the existing parties resign their membership so that the company can transfer over as a wholly owned subsidiary of the Shaw Trust Group, operating in the third sector with no local authority interest. As the board have already agreed the merger, it is really just as part of the process that the council are now asked to relinquish its minority shareholding. This proposal will give the Dovetail company the opportunity to be sustained and to continue to provide quality products alongside first-class training opportunities to the people of Tayside. Without this intervention, it is likely that the company could no longer compete in the market and could fail in the longer term. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Jim. Any questions? Questions? Nope. Councillor Lyle, move the report.
Thank you again, Provost. Dovetail Enterprises 1993 Limited is a charitable enterprise company which has for many years worked to provide sustainable employment opportunities for disabled people. Perth Kinross Council, as you've just heard, has a minority interest in this company extending to 3% of the voting power. As the report states, the company has worked hard to grow its business but has now reached a position where it requires significant investment to ensure its future stability and financial stability. The company have identified a solution as detailed in the report, which would see Dovetail Enterprises becoming a wholly owned subsidiary of the Shaw Trust. To facilitate this beneficial move for the company, Perth Kinross Council, along with Dundee City Council and Angus Council, must relinquish their minority interest in the company and step down as members of the board. I believe that this merger would put the company on a stronger financial footing and enable it to develop its business, thereby providing greater employment and training opportunities for disabled persons. And I'm happy to remove the recommendations in the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, second amendment.
Formally second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Band?
Just a small comment that I used to be the Accounting Services Manager for the Royal Dundee Institute for the Blind, of which Chris Craft was the main product. When I left there over 40 years ago and took up my own employment here in Perth, I left the office in charge of my then office manager. And when the opportunity came up to be on the board, when I became a councillor here, I went back there and the same chap was still in the same office and the same desk as he was 40 years before.
Thank you for that, Councillor Van. Brings back my memories. Agree with the report? Thank you. Item 8, Affordable Housing Member Officer Working Group. Can we agree to re-establish the Affordable Housing Member Officer Working Group on the basis of the enclosed? Councillor Beale.
Thank you, Provost. I have an amendment, if I may.
Okay. Right.
So,
have we got copies?
Yeah, if we could circulate copies, please.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you.
Just while those are being distributed, I'll talk to the amendment, if that's okay. What this paper proposes a 5-member MOG, essentially.
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear that.
The paper proposes a 5-member MOG, and I would like to propose that we extend that to a 6-member MOG in line with other MOGs we have, and also that would allow broader political participation across this chamber, because it would allow us to put forward someone from the Scottish Labour and Independent group, in addition to 2 SNP, 2 Conservative and 1 Liberal Democrat. And that's detailed in the paper. That was all I had to say, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Murray, would you be happy to incorporate this amendment?
Thank you very much, Provost. No, I'm quite happy to go with the paper as is written.
Okay. Would you like to read it out? Say,
I'm quite happy to formally second that, Provost, but I'm happy to read it out as well if you'd like.
Is there any point of writing it out, really?
I think we can all see it.
You're all quite happy with
it. I'm quite happy to second.
You're quite happy. Councillor Bailey? Yeah, you do. Okay. Thank you. Are you all in agreement with that? No.
Is he in agreement or not? There's not agreement.
There's not agreement.
There's not agreement. Okay.
I thought you said, sorry, Councillor Lamb, I thought you said your agreement. I beg your pardon. Okay, go to that. Can I hear your amendment?
They've just given the amendment.
Done it?
Go to the vote. To debate.
Okay, we're open to debate then.
Or put, no, we just. What was that? Yeah, we'll just need to assume it because if there's 2 varying opinions.
Right, where are we here?
Provost, my understanding is that we have a motion from Councillor Lyle, seconded by Councillor Barrett, to approve the remit and membership of the Member Officer Working Group as set out in the agenda. And we have an amendment from Councillor Bailey, seconded by Councillor McDade, to approve the membership as set out in the amendment that has been circulated to you. Can I therefore ask councillors to indicate whether they're voting for the motion or the amendment? Councillor Ahern.
Motion.
Councillor Anderson.
Amendment.
Councillor Bailey.
Motion, sorry. Amendment, to be clear.
Councillor Baird. Councillor Band.
Amendment.
Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Barrett.
Motion.
Councillor Braun.
Motion.
Councillor Brock. Councillor Audrey Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Harry Coates.
Motion.
Councillor Donaldson.
Amendment.
Councillor Dugan.
Amendment.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Duff.
Motion.
Councillor Forbes.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor Jarvis.
Motion.
Councillor Lane.
Amendment.
Councillor Lyle.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor McDade.
Amendment.
Councillor McEwen.
Amendment.
Provost.
Motion.
Councillor Parrott.
Amendment.
Councillor Pover.
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Amendment.
Councillor Rebeck.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Motion.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Sarwar.
Amendment.
Councillor Shires.
Motion.
Councillor Simpson.
Motion.
Councillor Stewart.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters. Councillor Williamson.
Amendment.
Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Provost, I have 19 votes for the motion and 21 votes for the amendment, so the amendment is carried.
Okay. Right. We'll move on to item 9, appointments to committees. Can we agree that Councillor Duff be appointed as an additional vice convener of the Lifelong Learning Committee?
Agreed.
10, amendment scheme of administration. Can we agree the amendment of the scheme of administration as set out in the agenda?
Agreed.
And item 11, last one, is timetable of meetings of 2019. Can we agree the change to the timetable of meetings as set out in the agenda? Thank you very much, everybody.